All right, I'm still here. Still got hobbling on bad knee. We're on chapter 7, the interview. Amy never met a reporter before. She was expecting a guy in a trench coat smoking a cigarette or maybe a cigar, hat pulled down over his eyes with a typewriter, in a dimly lit room with blinds around the windows, some broken, of course. She didn't know why she expected James Cagney, but she was a little disenchanted when she got there. It was a large room separated by cubicles, bright fluorescent lights, and computers in place of typewriters. Bob met them at the door and shook both of their hands. He was young, clean cut, casually just dressed in jeans and a button up shirt. Very unassuming, not the James Cagney type at all. He was slightly built, not exceptionally tall, but he had a kind looking face. She wanted to distrust him just because of the nature of his profession, but she found it hard to. He looked too innocent to distrust. She'd have to be on guard with this one. Don't let that baby face fool you, she told herself. They all sat down in his cube. So, Jim is rather excited about this project of yours, he said in a friendly voice. Amy was trying to maintain her cautious facade. So, how long have you two been friends? She asked, trying to get a feel for how much she could actually trust this guy. Since we were kids, Bob replied. Jim lived down the street from me. Huh, Amy heard herself say out loud. It hadn't occurred to her before, but Jim had never mentioned Bob. Or on the other hand, he never really talked much about his childhood either. This wasn't a time to start asking them both a lot of questions, so she decided to let it go. She wasn't sure why she felt the way she did. On one hand, she was excited about the idea of doing the article, but on the other hand, she wasn't too sure of the stranger who was now about to be a very integral part of her project. This man was basically going to be the PR link between her idea and the country. She was a little wary. She looked at Jim with half a nervous grin, and he gave her an approving nod. I trust Jim's opinion. I trust Jim's opinion, she said to herself like a mantra. Are you ready? Bob asked. Yeah, I'm ready. Let's start, she said, unconvincingly. It's okay to be nervous. Is this your first interview? Bob asked in a soothing manner that actually surprised her. Yeah, I don't know why I'm so nervous. Listen, you don't have to do this. If we don't have to do this, we can stop anytime if you don't like the and if you don't like the interview results, we don't have to publish them. Okay, no, I'm fine, she smiled. Now, and took a breath. Let's begin, Bob began professionally. Tell me about the pipeline. She went on to explain in layman's terms what her prospective project was about. She described the benefits on state, local, and federal levels. Bob asked her a few fundamental questions. Basically, it was her understanding that if he didn't quite understand something, then the rest of the country probably wouldn't understand it either. The interview took only about 20 minutes. Okay, I think I have enough. Really? There's so much we can get into, she began. We don't want to lay too much out there just yet. Let me write this up and we'll see what kind of response we get. You don't want an article in the newspaper to be too long or too winded. People just won't read it, he explained. It will run Sunday. Let's hope for a good response. Let's hope you write a good article, she thought to herself. She knew all too well that the ball was in his court now, and that made sense and it made sense to her now why she was so uneasy. She was relinquishing control of her work to someone else. Now it's in his hands to do whatever he wants with it. Can I see the article before you run it? She quipped, before considering what she was saying and whether she was coming off too controlling. Sure, I'll email it to you when it's finished. What's the matter? Don't you trust me? Bob asked, already knowing the answer. It's This is me, she said, revealing her insecurities. This is my life's work, my heart and soul. This is very important to me. She decided to go with her gut feeling and trust him. At this point, what did she have to lose? It was all on the line anyway. Please trust me, he said, looking down into her eyes. We are all on the same page here. I want the same thing you do. Please believe me. She smiled a bit, took a deep breath, and nodded to him. Amy and Bob exited the cube. and Jim waited patiently in the sitting room. He hopped up to his feet and clapped his hands together. So, how did it go? Bob took a breath, but Amy went first. It went well, actually. I think it was really good, she said, as she smiled quickly at Bob. Thanks, she said, and shook his hand. When she and Jim got in the car, Jim said, I'm glad you and Bob hit it off. I was worried you would have some difficulty relinquishing control of your baby to somebody else. Why? She said, I trust you. If you trust Bob, then I trust him too. They waited anxiously for Sunday, the day the article would be released. Bob did send it to her before he printed it. She liked it. It wasn't exactly how she would have done it, but she had to let go at some point. She had to come to realize that if this was going to work, she needed to let go just a little bit. Over the following days, responses poured into the paper. There were questions and comments of all kinds. There was definitely going to be a follow-up interview. This was precisely what they had hoped for. Interest. Interview number 2. Bob briefly explained to Amy that this interview would include more detailed information about the pipeline idea and also address some of the responses to the original article. This time she was more trusting. She let her guard down, relaxed, and was ready for anything that he would throw at her. Or so she thought. Bob, tell me how the pipeline will work. Amy, there is so much more to it than just the pipeline. There's also reservoirs, drainage ditches, aqueducts, and ponds. Bob, what is the purpose for all of this? Amy, the main priority is moving water from one region with too much to an area with insufficient water. How will this benefit the American people? It will help prevent localized floods and droughts and create jobs. I heard your plan will force welfare recipients to work on the pipeline instead of welfare. Amy's eyes got wide. She looked at Bob in disbelief. He shrugged his shoulders at her. Amy said, as an American, I believe forcing Americans to do anything is unconstitutional. However, there is nothing about welfare in our Constitution. The welfare system was created after the Great Depression in 1935. President Roosevelt made it to prevent the kind of hardships that our country saw during that awful time. If work is available in an area such as the pipeline, I feel all able-bodied Americans would rather take the work available to them than to collect from the government. Of course, this will be up to state and local governments to decide how they want to handle it. I know they know their people best. What kind of question was that, she thought. I thought we were on the same page here. Bob, is it true that that you propose to bring back the chain gang and force prisoners to work on the pipeline? Amy, no, not at all, she replied defensively. At this point, she was getting a little more than nervous. What is he trying to do here anyway? She asked herself. I believe in a system of rehabilitation versus corporal punishment, especially in the case of minor offenses. If a young person makes a mistake, they shouldn't have to pay for it for the rest of their lives by being branded a criminal. If we could just get people out and work for the state where they could learn a skill and collect a paycheck, of course, like the prison, they would be required to do it for a set amount of time, but they would be treated with the same rights and respect that all humans deserve. We would turn them into productive citizens instead of criminals, she continued, trying not to show that she was a little unnerved. It wasn't until after the interview that she confronted Bob about his questions. What the hell, Bob? I thought we were on the same page, she shouted, making little questionable quotes over her head. What are you talking about? I told you we would have to address some of the readers' questions and concerns, Amy. Don't tell me you didn't expect some negative feedback, he said calmly and non-defensively. Amy just stood there momentarily. She had to let that sink in. This is what people got from the first article, she thought. She began going over her responses to today's questions. She was now worried that she may have said something unclear. Did she leave too much room for interpretation? Bob was quick to pick up on her expression. I think you did a really good job today answering all of the questions the people had, he said, still working and hardly looking up at her. She sat down in a chair beside his desk and slumped over. She leaned her arm on his desk. Is this going to work? She said, looking sorrowfully at him. He looked up from his he looked up. He took a seat and looked her square in the eyes. Yes, he said steadfastly. If you want my opinion is yes, it will work. You're not the only one staking their reputation on this. That was the first time it dawned on her. He's sticking his neck out too. She suddenly felt a little bad for the way she had treated him. Thanks, she said poignantly. Really, thanks. Bob nodded his head and continued working as usual. She left, and not much more was said. The second article ran in the paper on Sunday. The buzz was just what you would expect. There were questions and comments, but the most important thing was that day was everyone was talking about the pipeline. The article, an ode to Thomas Paine, was titled The Common Sense Solution, and it was a hit. Bob was promised a weekly column in the Sunday edition. The papers flew off the shelves, and people called, wrote, emailed, tweeted, and Facebooked the paper with their questions. And they had plenty of them. Within the first week, the New York Times picked it up. And before they knew it, it was syndicated. The questions began flying in from around the country. A website was created just for the topic, as well as online petition. Suddenly, Amy and Bob were very busy. Some people didn't like the idea, but most did. They were urged to write to their local and state officials asking them to vote for it. Bob became quite famous, and the name Bob Roth was well known. Loved or hated, either way, there was talk of a Pulitzer. Amy was asked to appear on talk shows and daytime television. The duo became quasi-celebrities, although they took a beating sometimes. They mostly came out on top. With meeting and interviews, Amy needed somebody to understand engineering who could help read her reports and make sense of it all. She had been talking to Ben more and more often. Ben wanted to be on the project, so Amy asked him to join them in Boston. Ben came, and now the four of them could work together. They rented an office space to work from, and it became the vocal point for the pipeline. It was a well-oiled machine, and it was picking up momentum. Within 6 months, the pipeline was well known in most households, but like any light that burns too bright, it attracts attention, and not always the kind you want.